Welcome on into the Auburn Express, powered by the War Report. I'm your host, Mike G, and thank you so much for turning us up and turning us on live from SEC Media Days. Joining me as he does every single year, multiple times a year, talking Auburn football is my good friend Josh Pate from the Josh Pate College Football Show. Josh, you're no stranger to the show, so let's just jump right in. I sat down with Commissioner Sankey not too long ago to talk about NIL and the structure around NIL. He had a quote that I thought was interesting. I asked him, I said, is it frustrating that now that you have the structure that everybody asked for, that institutions are getting ready to mount legal challenges to their recruiting being challenged by NIL Go, which is the clearinghouse? And he said, look, it is frustrating. And if you don't want the structure, just say so, and we'll let you spend yourself into oblivion. Give me your thoughts here, man, on where this thing is headed for college football. It feels like I think you had this take a while ago about the playoff and expanding the playoffs, not really closing the gaps between the haves and the have-nots. Doesn't feel like NIL is doing that either.
It's not. There's no change that you're going to make. As long as the change is being made for everyone, then everyone's still playing on the same footing. Like if you were to go to Baylor and say, Baylor, we're going to give you an advantage the rest of the sport's not going to get. Well, that's different. Oh, that elevates Baylor. But that's not what we did. We changed the fundamental fundamentally altered the sport, but it altered for everyone. So whether it's an expanded playoff, whether it's NIL, there's still a funnel in this sport, Mike. There always will be. It's not National Football League. It's not pro sports. So there always will be places where intrinsically they are more passionate and more driven to succeed. They need to succeed as opposed to the places that just kind of want to. Some places take different sports more seriously. And so, like, I feel his pain on that. He doesn't need anyone to apologize for him, but I feel his pain on that. And it's almost like, to put it in perspective that maybe fans think more, you remember when we had the BCS? And that's how we decided the national title game. And then they played and we had a winner. And everyone said, I can't believe we let computers decide things. Well, then we got a human committee. And more every year, you, just like me, hear people say, I wish we could go back to the BCS way of doing things. Well, if you wanted it at the time, why didn't you just say so at the time? That's kind of his message.
Yeah, it feels like definitely not going to please everybody. But if you had money to spend before, you have it now. Auburn has chosen to take a more cautious approach to NIL, which is garnering a lot of criticism. AD John Cohen has come out multiple times in the media and said, Josh, that after August 1st, he thinks you're going to see a whole mess based on people trying to sidestep the guardrails that were put in place for NIL to make sure that people are abiding by the rules. What do you think about the wait and see approach as opposed to, you know what? They haven't proved that they can enforce it yet, so why not just spin until we get our hands slapped?
I remember when the early signing day first happened. Saban in Alabama had been rolling for a long time. They've been landing number one classes for a long time. Saban tactically looked at that and said, all right, well, how much should we push to land everyone on the early signing day as opposed to the second one? They didn't push as hard. Georgia, conversely, went all in on the early signing day. Georgia ended up with the number one class in the country. Bama finished fifth. Nick Saban misread the room. Now, he was the best coach in college football. He had all the equity in the world, and it was only the fifth best class. So it wasn't like the world caved in. No one really cared. No one criticized him. But my point is, even the best sort of misread the landscape. Okay, so fast forward to now. Like I was just doing radio, I think in Mobile, and someone was asking about how bad Auburn recruiting's going. That is one way to look at it. The right way to look at it is not to think that Hugh Freeze just forgot how to go get players. He's always gotten players. They've always gone and gotten players. He's done it everywhere he's been. So you either think, oh, he just gave up wanting to go get good players, or you think what I think, and that is they looked at the landscape, they came up with a plan, they came up with their strategy, and thus far it is yielding very, very poor results. Now, the follow-up is the August 1st thing that you're talking about. Now, as you and I are speaking, it is mid-July. So we only got about 2 more weeks to wait before rubber meets road on that little prediction that John Cohen made. I don't say little prediction pejoratively. I just mean that is something that they've thrown out there. And if they're right about it, they'll look like geniuses. They can't afford to be wrong about it. Like someone like Saban back in the day, he could afford to be wrong about the early signing day because they still got good players and they just corrected and got number one the next year. You may not have a next year, if you're not right about this at Auburn right now. And that is the just huge roll of the dice that this is. Because I do not look at it as thinking to myself, Freeze has just kind of mailed it in. Auburn's just kind of white flagged it in recruiting. You'll never sell me on that. What you can sell me on is they have assessed the landscape and they have chosen a different approach. And thus far, the approach has led to them being in the 70s in recruiting rankings. We'll see what happens in August.
Josh, you don't think there's time to pivot after August 1st, though, for Auburn to maybe say, if money was the only thing keeping you from Auburn before August 1st, nobody signs until December. What's to stop them from going back and saying, you know what? We've had a change of heart, and Daddy's got a little extra in the checkbook for you. Would you still consider Auburn?
Yes. No, that's absolutely correct. That's why I'm saying here and now, you got a lot of people making proclamations, and there's still a long way to go. Like the August 1st thing's there, but even if August 1st doesn't pan out the way that, they have predicted that it will, well, okay, then like you just said, well, then it's all right, game on. And then you got the entire fall to go. And if it's just going to be a bidding fest, well, then let's go enter our bids, because thus far our bids aren't really out there. Now, you hope it really doesn't come to that. Like, that's kind of not what you want college recruiting to be, but it kind of has been that. But then the follow-up is, do we think that there are enough loose apples on the trees committed to other schools that if we shake it the right way, they fall? It may be. I wouldn't want to rely on that, is what I'm saying. I wouldn't want to rely on, I'm going to go to a whole bunch of kids to decommit. I'm not saying it's impossible. It happens every year. I'm not saying it's impossible. It's just that's not the needle I would want to thread.
Let's change gears to talk about Auburn's season. This is a make or break season in a lot of ways for Auburn. They've added another layer with this NIL thing. But the truth is, this recruiting class isn't going to have a hill of beans to do with how they play football in the fall. It feels like Hugh Freeze's future at Auburn is riding on Jackson Arnold's arm this year. Roman Harper sat down on the show Monday and said, look, he's a great athlete, but he was a bad football player at Oklahoma. I'm not sure that I think he's a bad football player. I think a lot of things happened at Oklahoma. But, talk to me about Auburn offensively. You pay a lot of attention to Auburn offensively, and it's left a lot to be desired. Hugh Freeze, I asked him about the criticism he received for not giving Jarquez Hunter the ball enough. Auburn sticking to the run at times, but they built one of the best wide receiver rooms in the country so far. And I got to believe they're going to sling it around the yard, but they've got to score touchdowns, and they've got to get a signature win this year. We're 2 years in, and Hugh Freeze doesn't have a signature win.
I don't think he's accidentally calling plays. I think he's calling plays the way he wants to. So, I'm the same way as you. I looked at Jarquez Hunter's workload last year and thought to myself, if I'm struggling turning the ball over, if I've got inconsistent quarterback play, might I want to ride him a little more? It's not the way Hugh Freeze does things. So that's the end of that. If he's the wrong coach for the job, they'll get him out of there. They'll get a new coach in there. But what I also think is you're right about Jackson Arnold. Not only are you right about it, it's fair. I keep using that word about Auburn only because I respect the heck out of Hugh Freeze for coming in here and saying, the expectation is we should compete for a playoff spot. We should have that expectation. It's completely fair. Well, I agree with him. And it's good to state the obvious before someone else has to state it for you, and which he did. It is completely fair that year 3 and beyond at a place like Auburn, doesn't matter what you inherited, you should be a winner. And you should be competing for whatever the guys up the road are competing for, whether it be Athens or Tuscaloosa, down the road in Baton Rouge. They don't have anything that you don't have. They don't have access to anything that you don't have. And so I don't know how he feels about it. Like, I don't know how Hugh Freeze feels about it, because he knows his system. He knows his personnel better than we do. And then on the other side, Jackson Arnold, he knows what his reality was last year. He was very diplomatic in the way he talked here. But if you were his cousin and y'all were just out to eat on a Tuesday and he was really telling you what the truth of Oklahoma was last year, I imagine it would be a little more raw than, hey, no one's to blame. I'm just moving on. It is what it is. I would imagine it was kind of oil and water last year, and he knows I am a good football player, and I was not put in position to succeed. Will I be put in position to succeed this year? Sounds like he believes he will be. If he is, they got good enough players out of Freeze's own mouth, and I think he's right. Got good enough players to compete, but man, multiple years in, to have your fate in the hands of a guy you did not recruit and you did not develop, that's got to be a little uneasy.
Well, he feels like he recruited Jackson Arnold out of high school. He feels like he was a freak in high school, still feels like he's a freak now. He thinks that that's his guy. Peyton Thorne had a conversation with Jackson Arnold before he committed to Auburn, and Peyton told me that Jackson asked him straight up, "Hey, can I win there?" I think the answer was yes, since he committed to Auburn. But there's got to be some questions. If you're Jackson, you like what they've given you to work with. They've given you the opposite of what you had at wide receiver at Oklahoma, and you're probably looking on paper and saying, I could be the difference between, the 14 points Auburn lost by on average last year. That nobody ran away from Auburn on the scoreboard. Those were close games, Josh, that they had. The amount of games that they failed to win where they couldn't get to 24 points, which would have been good to win almost every single game, but like Georgia and maybe you tie Alabama and go into overtime, it was actually pretty remarkable. Let's talk about this first 6-game stretch for Auburn. There's a lot of questions this week about week 1 at Baylor. Baylor's a good football team. I think they're going to be a tough week 1 matchup, and it could be somewhat of a signature win for Auburn. It's a tweener for me in terms of signature wins, but it certainly wouldn't hurt to get your first 6-game stretch started with a win at Baylor. What do you think this team is going to look like week 1? Does it have to look like a well-oiled machine week 1? Or, what level of panic would you be in if Auburn came out and looked a mess but still won, or looked a mess and lost?
No. I don't care how they win. Just please win week 1. I couldn't care less if it's a well-oiled machine or they stumble their way into a win. I'm a big believer more games are lost than they are won in week 1 anyway. So never apologize for winning ever, but especially in week 1. What I thought you were going to say is what happens, how much are you panicking if they lose week 1? And my answer is a ton. Even though you didn't ask that question, like my answer would be a ton. So in any scenario where they win, I'm like, you're talking about Baylor, and truthfully, I don't think most people know anything about Baylor. Baylor could win the Big 12 this year. Baylor could be everything Arizona State was. Yeah, that they are a very, very high quality, high caliber team. I don't want people to get fooled by the Big 12 sticker, in other words, because Arizona State was a Big 12 team last year. Last I checked, they had Texas in overtime in the playoffs, so or right there at the gun. So I have no idea what to expect out of that game. It's a Friday night game too. I have no idea what to expect. I honestly, although Hugh Freeze has got a much better read on his team than I do, I would love to get his honest prediction on the game before the game and see how accurate he is on his own expectations. I just don't know how you can have a good handle on it.
He's pretty bullish so far this offseason. The first 2 off seasons, all we heard was talent gap, talent gap, talent gap. This year, he's saying, we filled it. We're there. We feel like we have a talented football team. We feel like we got our guy at quarterback. We think we have one of the best wide receiver rooms in the country, if not one of the best wide receivers in the country in Cam Coleman. Last year's experiment with Keandre Lambert-Smith was a resounding success. Now they have Eric Singleton Jr., who's come in from Georgia Tech. Early reports are he's running a 40-yard dash in the low 4.2s, Josh, blazing fast, stuff you can't teach. They've got the playmakers, it seems. The running back room is good, but just a little unknown. Damari Elson is a great football player. Jeremiah Cobb is a great football player. Those are both 4-star guys. But they've got to win football games. Feinbaum asked me this yesterday. He said, how does Hugh Freeze change the conversation from golf and golf scores to football? And I said, you got to play football. That's it. Because when you're losing, everything sticks. Your golf game is a topic of a conversation. And that starts week 1 at Baylor. After Baylor, you get 2 cupcakes, and then you open your SEC schedule in Norman at Oklahoma. Revenge game for Jackson Arnold. Lots of storylines there. What do you see in that SEC opener, man, by game 4 for Auburn?
First thing I did when he transferred was I licked my index finger. I turned the pages to next year. Let me see. 1, 2. Yep. They play Oklahoma. Hold on. Got to sneeze. No, I don't. Never mind. That thing's going to be wild. Yeah. That's going to be wild because Oklahoma is an unfamiliar place for Auburn to go, just like it was last year for Oklahoma to come to Auburn. That's one of those weird, like early season games. Texas at Florida is around that same time where you look at it and the season's going to pivot for those teams, plus or minus pretty heavily based on the outcome of that game, especially OU Auburn. Because I expect Oklahoma to beat Michigan and be undefeated when Auburn goes in there. And yeah, like I think that's going to happen. So like I think Oklahoma is going to be in a position where they're undefeated still. So I think there's going to be a lot of national spotlight on that game. It greatly helps if Auburn beats Baylor in week 1. But it's good that you played Baylor already. It's good that you got out on the road. It's good that you experienced the crowd noise, hostile environment, because it won't be foreign to you by the time you go there. And also, honestly, man, it sounds kind of counterintuitive, but if I'm an Auburn fan, I want Oklahoma to beat Michigan comfortably. I don't want them to have struggled at all until we come in there. I want us to be the first one that puts them in the fire. And then, I mean, you got Brent Venables facing his former quarterback. That's, if you're into storylines, that one's got him.
I agree, my friend. After Oklahoma, you get Texas A&M, who you beat in 4 OTs last year, a thriller. I was down on the field running from end zone to end zone. I can tell you that was no fun for my heart. But Auburn pulled that one out for their 5th win of the season, inexplicably. And then you get Georgia at home to end your first 6-game stretch. I'm good for pulling predictions out of you every time you come on this show, but Auburn is what after the first 6 games? If you beat Baylor, you know, I would say 4-2 is a really, really good start. That means you got to win one of your first 3 SEC games, you know, there in the first half.
Say 4-2. I think 4-2 is fair. I would be. I mean, I know you don't want to say like you're happy with losses, but relative to what could happen, especially if you get there and then you feel like you found yourself by that point, I'll take 4-2. I would take that. I'll make that my prediction. I'll ride with you on that. Yeah.
You heard it here first. Josh Pate going with 4-2. After your 4-2 start, you get what I have called all offseason one of the most winnable stretches of Auburn football I've ever seen on a schedule. You get what should be a very different Missouri team. You get Arkansas. You get Kentucky, Vanderbilt, and Mercer before the Iron Bowl. You beat Kentucky last year. Losing to Arkansas was something that they had to try to do last year, if you ask me. You, on your own show, said take the under at Arkansas at 5.5, Josh. So look, I'm riding with you on this one. So I'm putting that as a W on Auburn's schedule. I think they can clean that 5-game stretch after Georgia if they are a football team that has it together.
Yeah. One thing I don't know is I don't know what that stretch early in the season did for them injury-wise. I'd love for that depth chart to still be pristine. Yeah, well, if they're healthy, they can do that. Yeah. And that's when, like, someone does this every year. Someone has that stretch in their season, and they just boom, 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 boom. They start clipping them off. Like Clemson kind of did a version of that last year. Right. That's a better example, actually. That's what you're trying to do. You're trying to be the South Carolina of this year, and you're trying to – well, what you hope is so you ride that late in the year. Carolina rode that to a win against Clemson. Like it's all about riding that towards what's coming because you know you got your end of the season. You do the same thing every year. You have got to peak at the right time. Ohio State taught you that last year. Like this thing's become so much about peaking in November, and you got teams that start hot and fade, and then you got teams that aren't really on your radar at the beginning of the season, and then they surge in November. That's the follow-up question for everyone, Hugh Freeze and beyond, is have you built your team, and is your plan organizationally such that you peak at the right time?
Peaking at the right time is the name of the game. I would say Arizona State peaked at the right time last year. I covered the Big 12. They were picked to finish last famously. I think they abolished the preseason poll because of last year's prediction of Arizona State last, and I think Utah was predicted to win the Big 12, and they finished in the exact opposite order. Utah finished at the bottom of the conference, and Arizona won the whole damn thing. Let's transition to the end of the season. Iron Bowl's coming. Just sat in with Kalen DeBoer in the electronic media room and asked him, after 1 year in the SEC and with Nick Saban staying so close to the program, what have you learned, right? And he kind of gave a non-answer. It was like, everything I learned from coach, I learned from afar, just watching him be the greatest coach to ever live. I'm like, okay, that's not an answer, but okay. I think he learned the SEC's freaking hard, Josh. And 9-3 will get the wolves out on your butt because Alabama, for all intents and purposes, should have made the college football playoff last year. I think a precedent has been set. 10 wins and you're in the SEC, 9 wins, and you leave it up to the fates, and everyone who left it up to the 9-win fate god, got left out. South Carolina got left out. Missouri got left out. Ole Miss inexplicably got left out, and Alabama got left out. If you're Auburn, this could, and you clean that 5-game stretch, this could shape up to be one of the most exciting Iron Bowls that we've seen for a while, with a playoff spot on the line. Do you expect that this year going into that November matchup?
At least one of them. Well, so what I'm thinking about is like the Texas A&M game last year. That it had winner is going to go to Atlanta. Both of them are in playoff contention into the last week of the season. Now you forget that because the loser's knocked out. In this case, it was A&M, but that was the whole thing going into that game. And we're getting Texas A&M back, and it's got playoff implications on it. Game didn't live up to the expectation, in my opinion, but that's neither here. It's not a Netflix special, so that's neither here nor there. If what you're predicting is true, if they've gone on that 5-game run, then yes, like that stuff's going to be on the line in the Iron Bowl. And at that point, if I can promise you that you've got a playoff spot on the line with the Iron Bowl right now, they'd take that. Auburn would take that right now. Yes, I'm fully convinced of that.
That's exactly what I was looking for there. If there's a playoff spot on the line, Josh Pate's taking Auburn. Look, when it comes to the battle of the media, I'm taking Josh Pate every time versus anybody. Josh, I want to thank you for joining me as always. I don't know if I got a season prediction from you, but give me a record here.
Yet. I'm getting to August before I even make them.
There's a lot that can happen here in the next few weeks. We'll see some things shape out, and there's a lot of talk about recruiting right now in the Plains, but the truth is there's a lot of football that has to be played that could affect that this fall. So we'll see how that goes. Guys, that's it for another great edition of the Auburn Express, powered by the War Report with our guy Josh Pate. This segment is brought to you by our friends at the Vibe Vault. You can visit them if you want to get fresh for the weekend. They're not just barbers, they're lifestyle consultants. Find them at 3462 Crosswinds Road, Suite E in Phoenix City, Alabama. That's right next to Marco's Pizza and the Renfro Supermarket. Also, this segment is brought to you by our friends at cameragraphics.net. They provided all the wonderful equipment that you see we filmed this interview on all week. And I also want to thank our friends at Golden's Cast Iron. Visit goldenscastiron.com/WR. Use code Get Your Weight Up for 15% off your weights and code TWR for $65 off fire pits and Kamado grills. I want to thank our friends at the Rogue Shop. Visit rogueshop.com. Use code REPORTER to get 15% off your Rogue Shop order. Pain, sleep, stress, anxiety, whatever ails you in life, the Rogue Shop has something that has you covered. We'll be back at you with more great coverage from SEC Media Days. As always, like and subscribe. We are the War Report on every social media platform. TW Report on TikTok. We're signing off, and as always, War Eagle.